give a brief explanation of what you did while you were at the detention center and what you do now.
Okay. Well, I wasn't at a detention center. I was at the federal prison. And what I did, I was there, one of the staff chaplains, so I provided provided religious services for them. I am a Baptist pastor, so I provided things from a Baptist perspective, and so I taught them and I preached from the Bible. I did a lot of counseling, a lot of grief counseling, a lot of notifications. Say if something happened at their home, they would call the chaplain, and the chaplain would relate whatever bad information may have happened. I spent a lot of time going into the, we call it the SHU, it's SHU. It was the special housing unit, and that was for, isolation, where an inmate was incarcerated inside the prison who was a really violent offender. And so I would spend time in there going around and sharing the gospel and just spending time to get to know people and trying to do something to help them come to a relationship with Christ. And so that was my basic job. And I had to do all that with, at the same time, just kind of keeping, there's a lot of legal requirements within the prison and keeping privacy and just making sure that their rights, if they wanted to worship, that they had the right to worship. And so that was just kind of my job as well.
Yeah, sure. So the book that I read, it's called Just Mercy, and it's a book by Bryan Stevenson. And most of the book is it's about bringing awareness to how the criminal justice system treats the poor, disfavored, incarcerated, accused, and condemned. And the author of this book, actually, he was a lawyer. And he defended a lot of people who were falsely accused, who were death row prisoners. And so consequently, a major theme throughout this book is the death penalty. And I was just wondering if you have an opinion, what is your opinion of the death penalty, and how has your Christianity played into that opinion?
Well, I think the Bible's pretty clear. You're kind of in some ways, people will take the idea of love and say, well, we love people enough to not give them the death penalty. But if there's a crime that has been committed, in my personal opinion, that's worthy of the death penalty is a just deterrent for crime. Having been on the other side, not defending them, but just simply there in the prison system, ministering to people, what I see is a lot of people who I would say that there's some that would not be reformed, and if they have, I've worked with some on death row, and there are people just like you and I who've committed crimes. And one of the reasons, like I said, for the death penalty is a deterrent. It's a deterrent for crime. If the death penalty is extracted or taken away, you kind of miss one of the tools to help keep very violent offenders in check. Because if they have the fear of death, it may prevent them from doing some things. Mm-hmm. So for me, on the other side of this, not being a lawyer who's defended it, but someone who's been in the mud with prisoners, I believe the death penalty is a just deterrent for crime. I think I don't think it in any way contradicts the Christian values that I espouse, because I believe that if a person is guilty, there is a just punishment. So it is, it's actually a matter of justice. And in some ways, it is just as loving to do that, because I don't think you can love someone if you're not willing to. It's the same thing. It would be the same principle at your home. Your parents punish you because they love you, and so I think in the same way, it is also a loving action to exact the punishment that is due for the crime. Now, there are some people, I believe, that are in prison that are innocent, but they're far and few between.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, so that's a lot of who the author defended. A lot of the book just encompasses, I think, those who you say are far and few between are the innocent ones. And he talks about a lot of people he has defended who were innocent, and then some who actually ended up being executed because of the death penalty. So just when you served as the chaplain, did you ever observe any like discrimination of just any kind?
I think that there was more discrimination among the inmates than there was among the. Well, let me just say, first of all, yes, there was discrimination, but it went more inmate to inmate than it did, from my eyes. It went more from that vantage point than, say, those that were the correctional officers and those that were in the correctional field than it did toward. It didn't happen as much in that direction, mostly because I was in the federal system, and there are a lot of very strong boundaries that they put in place. And even if there was everyone from that standpoint, the inmates were protected. They were not protected. They were protected from other inmates, but the more discrimination was against. It was not even so much. There was racial discrimination because there were racial groups, but the discrimination was more against people who committed crimes such as, where they harmed children, they did things to children. Those people were treated worse, and they were discriminated against than, say, the other inmates. And that was inmate to inmate, not necessarily correctional officer to inmate, but it was inmate to inmate. So I did see that, and it was along racial lines as well, because there is a distinction in prison between the races, and they, more often than not, they congregate race to race in the prison, and gang to gang, because there's still gangs in the prisons, and so there is some discrimination that goes on. Everyone has their little group, and their groups will tenaciously defend those that are in their group.
Yeah. So, but with the people that you were able to talk to who were death row inmates, did you notice like trends towards like were more of them? Was there like a more significant number of one race as compared to like another race?
No. In fact, in the federal system, it's a little bit different than it is in the state judicial system. If you were to call up the Bureau of the Federal Bureau of Prison Statistics, you would see the racial demographics, and they're a little bit surprising. They're not the same as you hear on the news media. The state prison system, they're pretty accurate on those, that there seems to be more, and it depends on the state, there seems to be more of one group over the other. But in the federal system, it kind of goes in the other direction. So your statistics that they say, and I would look that information up, don't take my word for it, but I would look that information up, because in the state of South Carolina, you'll see that I think there's more black people who are incarcerated than white people and Latino. But in the federal system, I think it's more white people than it is black people and Latino. But don't take my word for it. I would check those statistics. I would look those up myself. Don't quote me on that. But that's what I if I remember correctly. It's been a few years since I've looked at the stats, but at this point in time, that's my understanding, is that it's federally, and those are more, the crimes that are committed on a federal level are larger and more diabolical. And certainly you have murderers, rapists, and thieves in the state system, but people in the state systems are normally incarcerated for their crimes are just different, and they're all bad. But the federal system is just a little bit different. It's a little bit more difficult to deal with, and a little bit hardened criminal there.
Okay, thank you.